Hello and welcome back to Bookish Theories! In today's video, we'd like to talk about Dark Moon with a knife and focusing on a little breakdown and analysis of episode 2 both on Webtoon and on Wattpad to see what they can tell us about this unfolding storyline. So, today we have a lot to catch up on because I'm very late, as always. But just in case, please keep in mind that this video will contain spoilers for episode 2 both on Webtoon and on Wattpad, so now that we got that out of the way, let's jump right in because we have a lot to talk about. Now, episode 2 on Webtoon actually begins with Sue and Heli continuing the conversation that they started in episode 1. Back then, we ended with Sue expressing a hatred towards vampires and with Heli silently acknowledging this information. In this new chapter, the conversation continues on the very same note, and even if we get the sense that Sue's anti-vampire stance makes Heli feel a bit uneasy, he's also very understanding of her personal experiences. While Sue shares her struggles with Heli, however, we as the audience actually learn new pieces of information about this world, because even if in this reality vampires are real, they seemingly haven't been real for quite a long time. You see, according to Sue's parents, before she was born, vampires were mythical creatures that only existed in novels. In the chapter, Sue doesn't know what led vampires to come into existence, but judging from Heli's expression, he might actually be one of the people involved in this sudden change. Now, up until now, we obviously don't know what's this about, but one interesting detail to point out is that if on the one hand Sue told us that vampires used to belong in books, on the other, Heli came into the room in order to retrieve a book that seemingly contains some old stories. Now, this might be something and it might be nothing, but at the same time, I think that this is a parallel that will be worth keeping in mind in the future. If you look closely, when Sue goes to retrieve the book for Heli seems very nervous that she's handling that text. At the very beginning, it's almost like he doesn't want her to touch it, or even better, that he doesn't want her to read it. When Sue wonders what the book is about, Heli is super evasive, and when she starts talking about the library, he gets even more nervous, so much so that even Sue notices that he's actually acting weird. Now, since Sue only had one friend and we all know how that went, she's obviously blaming herself for Heli's behavior. She apologizes for being so talkative and immediately gives the book back to Heli, and even if Heli is very nice about it, he immediately leaves soon after. Now, at this point, something interesting actually takes place, because the moment Heli leaves, Sue immediately regrets not asking for his name. She thinks that that was her only chance at making a friend, and she resents herself for not taking this opportunity, but as soon as she thinks that, Heli barges in once again and essentially makes her dream come true. Heli here not only asks her for her name, but he introduces himself and eventually even suggests to become friends. Now, this part of the story is actually very cute, right? But at the same time is also very interesting, because this is the first time in the webtoon where Heli is actually indirectly using his powers. Bear in mind, Heli has the power of telepathy, so whatever Sue is thinking, he can basically hear with his mind. This is why he comes back into the room after leaving just a second before. He heard Sue regretting not asking for his name and wanting to be his friend, so what he did was basically come back and essentially fulfill her request. If this was the first time where we kinda see Heli's power in action, it surely won't be the last, because as we'll see in a second, they will come in handy soon enough. Now, after Heli leaves the room once and for all, we finally get to meet the rest of the gang, and the first two members that we meet are actually Gino and Shion, who are respectively Jake and Sonu's characters. Now, right off the bat, we get the sense that the two of them are kind of the social butterflies of the group, because as soon as Heli tells them about Sue, both of them are very excited about this new arrival. Their desire to meet her grows even more when the boys realize that Sue's room is actually the hideout that the group uses to hang out. Heli figures that if they manage to become friends with Sue, then they can still spend time in that room, and the other two seem on board with this resolution. Their social plans, however, are immediately interrupted by Solon, who is Sunghoon's character, and the vampire who immediately reprimands the others for even thinking of befriending a human. The interesting thing, however, is that this conversation is actually taking place in their mind, because if before the speech bubbles were black, now they're color-coded according to the member who is communicating with telepathy. You see, if in the story Heli, Gino, and Shion are very friendly with the humans, the same cannot be said for Solon, who in turn is actually very distrustful of his peers. His opinion is also shared by Jake Jay's character, which in my last video I called Jan, even if he's actually called Ian. Listen, never in my life I would have thought that that could be a spelling for Ian. Like, it didn't even cross my mind, not even once. So thanks to all of you who corrected me in the comments, and I'm sorry for my mistake because it was completely unintentional. Anyway, in the story, Ian and Solon are usually very careful about interacting with the humans, but this time Ellie is very insistent because he actually saw in Sua something different. She's not like other girls, you know, and at this point the others kinda want to know why. Shion actually wonders if she might actually be one of them, but Shino is confused about this possibility because other vampires cannot enter the Desalis Academy. On top of that, Solon reminds them that it's impossible for Sua to be a vampire because the 7 of them are the only vampires left. Now, this is actually a very interesting comment, especially if we keep in mind what Sua told us before. If before Sua's birth vampires didn't exist, and now that Sua is a teenager, the only ones left are the 7 brothers. If we trust this timeline of events, then the shelf life of vampires in this world is actually very short, because they basically came and went in the span of 15 years. This, however, is only true if we actually assume that Sua is the age that she thinks she is, because by the looks of it, she might actually be a lot older than what she seems. You see, even if Heli agrees that she's not one of them, it's also true that he's attracted to her in ways that he cannot actually explain. Shion thinks that Heli might have a crush on her, but once again, Solon reminds them that vampires don't feel emotions the way that humans do, and even if they did, they actually shouldn't. This is something that Ian agrees with as well, because in his opinion, befriending Sua might actually cause more troubles than what it seems, so when the telepathic conversation ends, Ellie is defeated and rightfully so. The second chapter ends with Solon saying out loud to stay away from the new girl, and wouldn't you know it, the new girl is right behind him to hear him. Couldn't he just, like, say it? No, plot device. Anyway, we'll discuss what happens next in my next video about the Blood Altar, but in the meantime, let's jump to the Wattpad, where none of this actually took place, and Ellie and Sua actually met each other a whole month after Sua arrived at the school. If you remember, in the first episode, Sua and her friend Alex were going to the stadium in order to watch the boys playing nightball, when all of a sudden Sua remembered that she forgot her phone in the room, and she went back in order to get it. This is when Sua was attacked by a vampire and eventually saved by Ellie, who in turn killed the creature and ended the episode by asking her out the following day. Now in this new chapter, the story continues with Ellie walking Sua back at the dorm and with a mysterious man inspecting the body of the vampire in the alley. This mysterious man is none other than Ian, who actually witnessed everything that happened just a second before and is now waiting for Ellie to return. When he does, the two of them actually try to make sense of what just happened, and the conversation that they have actually raises a lot of interesting points that are worth keeping in mind. You see, in the chapter, we get the sense that the 7 brothers are almost vampire hunters in this version of events, because even if they're vampires in their own right, they never hesitate to get rid of the bad ones in order to bring peace to the human world. Because of that, the boys know a thing or two about the way these creatures hunt humans, so Ian immediately notices that the vampire that attacked Sua was not behaving like his peers would normally do. According to Ian, for instance, vampires that feed on humans usually kill their prey on the spot. This is actually the first detail that doesn't add up, because in Sua's attack, the vampire was trying to kidnap her instead of actually killing her straight away. Ellie actually points out that some vampires do like to bring their victims back to their lair, but what's interesting about Sua's attack is that that vampire actually seemed to recognize her. Now, by Ellie's own admission, this is not a good sign, but when the two of them try to find some clues as to why that might be, none of them actually find anything of interest. What is of Ellie's interest, however, is actually Sua herself, because even if he usually doesn't get involved with the ladies, he cannot deny that Sua is kinda dope. She's super fast, she's super strong, she thinks that vampires are ghosts, and all of these details are endearing to Heli, so much so that he cannot stop smiling at the thought. Your boy got a crush, you know, and Ian doesn't waste any time mocking his brother about it. Ian even tells him that he's going to tell the rest of the group as soon as he can, but Heli's so into Sua that he doesn't even care because he doesn't want to hide it. This is how you know he's serious, you know. He's in love. But why? Well, as it turns out, it's because she's literally the girl of the 7 boys' dreams. You see, ever since they could remember, the 7 vampire brothers had a recurring dream involving a mysterious girl, and Ellie happened to be the one that dreamt about this girl the most. Since they didn't know her name, the boys used to call her Princess, and no matter how much they talked about it, none of them could find an answer as to why they dreamt about the same girl all the time. Now Now, however, things are finally starting to change, not only because Sua looks exactly like the girl of their dreams, but also because their princess finally has a name. This is something that attracts Heli, but in contrast, Ian is far more cautious because he's actually afraid that this could be a trap. You see, what Ian is scared of is that the dreams might have been an illusion created to lure them in, and that with Sua's sudden appearance, this plan might be starting to unfold. This is something that worries Heli as well, but as the two of them dispose of the vampire corpse, this part of the chapter ends with him wanting to meet Sua no matter what. Now, before we move on, let's take a look at the information that we have so far, because as it turns out, there is quite a lot to unpack. So, up to this point, we know that the 7 brothers used to dream of a princess without a name. Judging from what we saw in their videos, we can say that this woman could actually be the woman in white that we saw in Drunken Dazed, because she's dressed like a princess and fits the description because of that. Now, since in this chapter, both Heli and Ian actually recognized Sua as the princess, then we can assume that Sua is indeed the lady that we saw in Drunken Dazed, meaning that somehow and some way she is actually involved in them becoming vampires to begin with. Even if we actually don't know whether the boys were already vampires at this point, the fact that she's giving them blood during some sort of ceremony kinda makes me think that this is where it all began. According to what we know so far, moreover, even if Sua is somehow special, she's not a vampire, and this also fits with what we saw in Drunken Dazed, because even if the lady actually gives them blood, she doesn't bite them or transform them in a regular way. This might imply that Sua might be a completely different entity altogether, but what's interesting about this chapter is that Ian is actually afraid that she might be an illusion created to lure them in. Now, this is actually a very important detail, I think, because judging from the information that we got from their music, the boys actually crossed the border because they were lured in by a flicker that blends and deceives. This flicker was described as a signal that connects a world out of line, and the whole concept of Border Carnival was that the boys were lured in by this illusion that essentially put them in a daze. Up until now, my angle was that the lady in white was the entity that sent them the signal, because according to the references to Shakespeare that they left in the songs, in the poem the boy's downfall is caused by a dark lady that made him fall into temptation. Now, however, I'm not so sure, because in this chapter, Ian is not afraid of Sua per se, but rather what Sua might represent. This might actually imply that the lady in white is not the one who sent the flicker, but rather that she is the flicker that blinds and deceives. If we take a look at the lyrics, this would also make sense considering how this woman is described in the songs, because if in Fever she is their new sun that burns them with desire, in Drunken Days they mention the flames of a torch that they have to master. Well, in the video she is the source of light in the scene, and she's even standing on a throne that looks exactly like the handle of a torch. Following this imagery, it makes a lot of sense that the woman is the flicker that is blinding them with their light, and if this is the case, then Ian might be right about Sua as well. Now, do I think that Sua is evil and that she's somehow trying to trick them? No, I don't. But if she is the princess from Drunken Days, and this princess is supposed to be a source of light in the darkness, then the first thing that I'm going to think is that she might be none other than the moon, or at the very least an entity whose powers come from the moon. If you think about it, the moon has a bright side that is able to fascinate you and attract you, but also a dark side that is hidden from sight. Since this story is literally called Dark Moon, then we can assume that whoever will embody this dark side will be an essential part of the story as a whole. If I'm right and Princess Sua is indeed the bright side of the moon, then the dark side might be a part of her that she's not aware of. Who knows, maybe it's an evil twin, a doppelganger, or maybe something else altogether. To know more about this part of the story, we'll have to wait and see, but one interesting detail to point out at this point is that the dreams that the boys are having might not be dreams, but rather memories of a past that they forgot. Now, as it turns out, this idea might also be confirmed by the next part of the chapter, where this time it's Sua the one who is having a weird dream that is very similar to the ones that the others are having. In the vision, Sua is with Heli, and Heli actually calls her a princess. Now, right off the bat, this is very interesting, right? Because once again, we get the sense that their dreams are matching up, and that their first encounter seems to have unlocked a memory rather than anything else. What's interesting about Sua's dream, however, is that if she's the princess, Heli and the others actually seem part of a royal guard. In the dream, Heli is wearing a black uniform and the vision itself begins with him finding Sue after she disappeared without telling him. When Heli scolds her, Sue tells him to stop nagging because he's always able to find her even if she doesn't tell him where she goes. Heli insists that it's still dangerous, and the narration lets us know that Heli is the one who values the rules the most and that he's the one staying closest to the girl. Now this comment here actually implies that him staying by Sua's side is literally part of the rules that he has to follow, thus suggesting that his job is possibly that of a protector or a guard. Even if Sua is strong and the two of them seem friendly, the way the narration unfolds makes me think that Heli's duty is to protect Sua from any danger. Now this is interesting because even if we don't know when the dream is set, Heli is described as having green eyes, and this is very telling because if in the webtoon his eyes are golden, when he was fighting the vampire in the Wattpad his eyes were pitch black. The fact that in the vision his eyes are green might actually imply that Sua might be dreaming of a time where she was a princess and Heli was not only part of a royal guard but also was still a human. Whether this is the case or not, however, the idea of Heli calling her a princess is enough to send Sua into a panic because the moment she wakes up, this idea essentially makes her lose her mind. You see, even if Sua always had dreams about people getting killed by vampires, always had incredible strength and always had incredible powers, her goal was always to be normal, if not for herself, at the very least for her own mother. Even if normality went out the window the moment she was almost killed by a vampire, her dreaming of Heli calling her a princess is essentially the straw that breaks the camel's back, so when Heli texts her in real life, she essentially loses her mind. Now, to be honest with you, this next part is a little bit insufferable, so I will spare you. It's basically Sua going on and on and on about the fact that she wants to be normal, but she can't because she's got superpowers and the coolest guy in school wants to date her, so there's that. She repeats 1,000 times that she cannot get involved with Heli, so obviously the chapter ends with her going out with Heli, because of course she does. Now, since in this version of events Heli goes to night classes but Sua goes to day classes, he essentially goes to pick her up after school and her friend Alex has a stroke about it. Heli actually proposes to go eat ice cream, so off they go eating ice cream in the sunset. Before they even get there, however, Sua actually asks Heli if he got rid of the vampire body in the alley, to which he actually replies that he did. In turn, Heli wonders why she wasn't surprised to see such a creature, why she didn't even know it was a vampire. To this question, Sua replies that she was not her first time seeing a monster like that, and this surprises Heli because apparently it's not something common to hear. To know why, however, we'll have to wait and see. But what do you think? Is Sua a vampire? Is she the moon? Is she normal? Let me know in the comments down below. In the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please think about liking and subscribing. As always, thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye bye!